Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, February 8th, 2019. I hope you, like me, are all in your bathrobes taking pictures of yourself to send to the National Enquirer. I am not doing this. By the way, can I just, I don't want to pry or anything or get into your personal life, but can I just recommend never taking pictures of yourself without your clothes on or exposed in any way. Certainly not on anything that's connected to the internet. It's just bad news. Unless that's your business, in which case, I guess go ahead, have a good time, send us some complimentary passwords, and we'll all talk about you on the air. And that all publicity is good publicity, right? So you got nothing to fear. But if you are a private sort of person, the cloud stuff, maybe not for you. And I don't know. If you're a billionaire, I guess you can do whatever you want. That's part of the news this morning, only because it was part of the news last night and we weren't on the air. And now we have to wake up to share some of this nonsense with you. You kind of probably already heard this news, but today we actually have to talk about the story. It's very intriguing, and we're going to have to talk about it. Jeff Bezos, who is the owner of Amazon.com and also the owner of the Washington Post, and therefore on the enemies list for Donald Trump. Some auto-playing video that has to be killed off here because I dared to dabble in reading something from The Hill. So, okay, sorry about that, everybody. So, Jeff Bezos, he's been in the news, and I guess it was the National Enquirer under their corporate umbrella, American Media, whatever it is, Incorporated, AMI. They got a hold of a story for the National Enquirer that says that Jeff Bezos' marriage was in trouble, I guess, because he had a girlfriend on the side and all of these horrible, terrible, nasty things that lots of people occasionally get themselves involved in. This rich person also got himself involved in as well. No comment, I guess, for now on what that means in terms of thinking you're invulnerable to everything if you're a billionaire. But, as you know, close relationship between the publisher at AMI, David Pecker, and the Pecker in the White House, Donald Trump. And it's long been rumored that the National Enquirer was at the head of the catch and kill operation, as they call it, for Donald Trump. Anytime there was a nasty story out there circulating about Donald Trump because they were true, and that's how stories circulate when they're true, they would they'd get a hold of the people in the news who had a juicy story to tell because they had been involved in it, and they would promise to juice them for that story. We'll pay you for your juicy, juicy story. And then they would sit on the story, but they'd make them sign an exclusive contract and have a non-disclosure agreement about the contract. And we would get the exclusive rights to publishing the story. And then they would pay you the money, and the person would think, this is great, I'm getting my story told. I'll show you, powerful person, who took advantage of me or who I let take advantage of me, depending on the situation. And now I'm angry with you, and I'm going to get you back by exposing you in this very credible newspaper, the National Enquirer. Anyway, then they would, of course, buy the exclusive rights to the story, then refuse to print the story, and the person couldn't take the story anywhere else, or else they would be sued for violating that contract, and most people aren't in any position to withstand that sort of legal onslaught. But I guess if you're a billionaire, you can. But that's not what was going on in this case. But most people, desperate for the $150,000 that AMI promises to pay you, for exclusive rights to the story, not only would you lose that $150,000, but you'd be sued on top of that, and you'd end up in the hole. And most people can't deal with that. So that was how they ran the operation over at the National Enquirer on behalf of Donald Trump and probably some other people too. And it was probably pretty profitable. And they got plenty of payoffs, and they could sell lots of papers if things went south with any of the agreements. So, there was always that backup plan, actually reporting the things that they collected story-wise. And as that became more widely known, I guess it rose to a new level, wherein AMI/National Enquirer would seek out incriminating or embarrassing information or photographs of others, of people who were criticizing them, and or exposing, no pun intended, exposing the operation, the catch and kill operation, and they would threaten them. And I guess that's what happened with Jeff Bezos. It didn't work out very well, although they did get a chance to embarrass Jeff Bezos a little bit. As the story goes, yesterday evening, tweet went out about 6 o'clock from Jeff Bezos saying, "I've written a post," not something in the Washington Post. He very pointedly did not use the Washington Post for this. He didn't need to, and it probably would have been a bad idea for a number of reasons. "I've written a post using medium.com, as it turns out, about developments with the National Enquirer and its parent company, AMI. You can find it here." And that's it. That's the tweet. There's a link to a piece entitled, "No Thank You, Mr. Pecker, Jeff Bezos," at Medium, signed Jeff Bezos, and it's posted at Medium. I don't know, I guess the title is "No Thank You, Mr. Pecker," which is funny all by itself. And it led to all kinds of great headlines today. But first, we'll tell you the story. So it's very nondescript, the tweet. But I had to read it after seeing it retweeted about 15 times with various comments attached to it, like "holy crap" or "OMFG" or various other fun things that made me think, something serious might be going on here. "No Thank You, Mr. Pecker" is the title of the piece. Jeff Bezos, obviously the author. "Something unusual happened to me yesterday." That's how he starts. Actually, for me, it wasn't just unusual, it was a first. "I was made an offer I couldn't refuse," or at least that's what the top people at the National Enquirer thought. Okay, I'm intrigued, right? "I'm glad they thought that because it emboldened them to put it all in writing. Rather than capitulate to extortion and blackmail, I've decided to publish exactly what they sent me, despite the personal cost and embarrassment they threaten." Now, you've likely read the story or heard the story by now, so I guess the best thing to do is just skip to the good part, or just make it long story short for you. So the National Enquirer was rumored to be behind the discovery of this Bezos. Is mistress a term that we use anymore? Is that out? Is that passé? Is that another French word that we might, use to describe? There's something off color, perhaps, about using. I don't know. Anyway, they discovered this. They published the story that he was having an affair. This more than likely ruined his marriage. That is to say, he ruined his marriage, and they found out about how he intended to ruin it, even though he didn't intend to ruin it. He secretly did. And so, okay. Well, anyway, that caused a big splash, and everybody wondered right at the outset, Donald Trump hates the Washington Post because they report on what he does, and that makes him mad. And in his world, the owner of the company that does something that makes you mad is the one who's really doing it. And in some cases, that's actually true. So I guess he was targeting Bezos for something. And he figured, the National Enquirer might be useful in all this. So I guess what they discovered, it's the same information. They discovered that he has this girlfriend, and they discovered it because they text back and forth in a sexually provocative manner, including naked pics, which in the vernacular these days, when he sends them to her, dick pics. I think you can actually say that. And thank you, Anthony Weiner, for allowing us to be able to say that on the news these days. So I guess that's what you do with yourself when you're a billionaire. What do you get for the man who has everything? You get him a camera to take a picture of everything and send it to people he's not married to. Okay, great idea. I don't know what motivates that. People like sex. That's just the way it is. And I don't know. Maybe if I had $1 billion, I'd like to send naked pictures to people. I can't really see how the money has anything to do with it, but I think you tend to think of yourself and all the parts of yourself differently when every day is about doing whatever the hell you want to, buying whatever the hell you want to, and making everybody do whatever you say. So maybe that has something to do with it. Anyway, I'm not here to psychoanalyze him. They're sending these sex texts back and forth to one another. And there's some, relatively interesting description of how these things go in this post, because this post, what he does is he just flat out republishes the threat emails that he got from AMI saying, we have this picture, this picture, this picture, and we're going to print them unless what they ask him to do is they tell him, we want public statements from you. I guess I should find where they make their demand so we can get the phrasing of their demand right. But they basically say, look, we need you, Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post. This is what they're interested in, really, to say that there's really no evidence at all that AMI, National Enquirer, or whatever, have been running this interference game, this catch and kill game for Donald Trump. Basically, swear that off. You gotta wave hands at that and make people, we're hoping people will believe that that's not really true. And if you don't do that, then we're gonna publish the following pictures, and they describe them. So what was it here? They wanted him to make the false public statement to the press that he has no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AMI's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces. Because it was, and they don't want anybody to believe that, so they thought they could blackmail Bezos with naked pictures into saying the opposite. And so, long story, still a little bit long, he said, go F yourself. Do what you got to do. You want to publish the pictures, publish the pictures. I mean, we'll sue you over doing that. But no, I'm not going to just put out a lie to protect your interference game for Donald Trump. That should be exposed. And besides which, I can't, he says, get into the game of knuckling under to this kind of blackmail. Where would something like that end, right? And he's right. It's actually something the Democrats very recently discovered with Donald Trump. You give in to that kind of blackmail once, or that kind of bad behavior, like shut down the government in exchange for some demand, then he'll just do it again. And that ain't gonna work. So he said no, and that's fun and cool. We all understand that. And that led to a big splash. And now it has led to plenty of others coming out with stories and saying, hey, this happened to me too. So, okay. Who, for instance? Well, now I got to go to Pocket and pull this stuff out. Let's see. By the way, there's more. I guess maybe we'll do this short bit of more now. And the first mention I have of this other bit is just a tweet. And let's see, did I park this one anywhere? Because then I had to grab the first written information. The first published story I saw about it, freely available to grab and easily grabbed on Twitter, was from The Hill. And, that's boring. Here we go. Julie K. Brown, a Miami Herald investigative reporter, tweeting yesterday, about 5 hours or so after that Bezos tweet went out. New Washington Post reporter, and remember, Jeff Bezos owns all of them, Washington Post reporter just said that Bezos's investigator, he hired a private investigator to track down what is AMI up to, what are they doing here? His investigator suspects that, quote, a government agency, unquote, intercepted Bezos's text messages. It was rumored how those pictures and text messages came to AMI's attention, which, wow, what would that mean? Is that true? I don't know. That's what was being circulated yesterday. And a government agency, I mean, are we talking about like Trump using leveraging government agencies' intelligence capabilities and signals intelligence capabilities to intercept Jeff Bezos's text messages in the hopes of finding something incriminating and then feeding it to AMI for them to put out there in order to silence the Washington Post's negative reporting or factual reporting about what Trump is up to elsewhere? Everyone would believe that pretty quickly. Is it true? Is it, which government agency are we talking about? And, now we're in now you're way into Nixon territory. Unless, as somebody pointed out, the government agency or government entity wasn't an American government entity, in which case we're into, depending on what government did it, Robert Hansen territory, or I don't know, Mr. Bonesaw territory. Because as it turns out, there's a pretty significant relationship between the AMI leadership and Trump and their friends from Saud-owned Arabia. In fact, the Sauds from Saud-owned Arabia. And there's plenty of connection there, too. I didn't even actually read too far into it, but there's a portion of Bezos's write-up which includes some discussion of, and maybe I should have read the whole thing, but it includes some discussion of this Saudish connection, and also embedded in the inside the post is a teaser for an AP news article. Let me see, how is this structured here? I'm looking at the Medium piece, and it's unclear what this embedded piece is. Did he put this in there, or is this? Oh yeah, there we are. Okay, let's straighten this part out here. Yeah, how is this done here? There's embedded quotes and pictures in here that I can't tell whether they are like teasers for other stories that sometimes get embedded in the story, or whether they were embedded by Bezos in his piece. But right in the middle of his explanation of the catch and kill operation, AMI, the owner of National Enquirer, led by David Pecker, recently entered into an immunity deal, we were reminded, and that's something to keep in mind here, with the Department of Justice related to their role in the so-called catch and kill process on behalf of President Trump in his election campaign. Mr. Pecker and his company have also been investigated for various actions they've taken on behalf of the Saudi government. And sometimes Mr. Pecker mixes it all together. And here's a quote here that says, after Mr. Trump became president, he rewarded Mr. Pecker's loyalty with a White House dinner to which the media executive brought a guest with important ties to the royals in Saudi Arabia. That would be the Sauds. At the time, Mr. Pecker was pursuing business there while also hunting for financing for acquisitions. Everybody loves to go there for financing for acquisitions. And then embedded there is, I guess, the source of that quote, which would be a New York Times article apparently titled, David Pecker, chief of National Enquirer's publisher, is said to get immunity in Trump inquiry. And then continuing on, federal investigators and legitimate media have, of course, suspected and proved that Mr. Pecker has used the Inquirer and AMI for political reasons, and yet AMI keeps claiming otherwise. Now, another quote, here we are, now I understand the medium format. This quote is from the publication that is the AP that covered the story of another Saud-ish connection to AMI. American media, they say in their claims, emphatically rejects any assertion that its reporting was instigated, dictated, or influenced in any manner by external forces, political or otherwise. Of course, legitimate media have been challenging that assertion for a long time. And then embedded in here is the AP article entitled Mystery Grows Over Pro-Saudi Tabloid. Embassy Got Sneak Peek. And it's the story of the New Kingdom tabloid, which was sort of this weird, splashy publication of uncertain provenance, and I'm not certain where it showed up. But you remember way back when, and I guess we're talking about like 2 years ago now, maybe 3. As I recall, for some reason, it strikes me that it was back in October, 2 or 3 years ago, that we were first reading stories about this dynamic new leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and that he was, a visionary, and he had this new vision for a new Middle East, and there was going to be this kind of reform and that kind of reform, but I remember reading these stories, and of course it was all in connection with things like Jared Kushner's visit over there, and so I guess we must be talking about 2 years ago, and the entire delegation. Remember that the Donald Trump, out of keeping with diplomatic practice, unsurprisingly, for the past umpteen billion years for the United States, you know how it is with us, billions of years old, out of keeping with the diplomatic practice of visiting our closest and most important allies, and they usually say either Mexico or Canada, our neighbors, where presidents tend to make their first overseas visits, or occasionally perhaps the United Kingdom, with whom we have this special relationship. Donald Trump inexplicably, put that in scare quotes, chose to visit Saud-owned Arabia first of all countries in the world for some unknown reason. And, at the time, it was enough to imagine, well, he loves money, so he's after some money, and he loves being treated like a royalty, and they were willing to do that for him and flatter him. And so, naturally, he chose, I want to do that thing that I like best and that makes me feel rich and maybe even be rich, rather than observe the regular diplomatic patterns of the United States. I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia first. And so he went ahead and did that. And this was right along the same time. We were reading all these fantastic stories, including this weird magazine that I guess appeared on, supermarket shelves for no particular reason. The New Kingdom, Meet the Next King, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Vision 2030, Our Closest, all the little splashy blurbs that they put on the cover. 100 new ways to have sex with Mohammed bin Salman. That, not that one, but that's like Cosmopolitan. You know how they do that sort of thing. I see. That's what I see on the supermarket checkout lines. That and like diet books, whatever. They put those little teasers on there, and it all designed to make it look like he was this dynamic man of the future, our closest Middle East ally, destroying terrorism, controlling staggering $4 trillion business empire, building $640 billion sci-fi city of the future, improving lives of his people and hopes for peace. Like, what a bunch of garbage, right? He's a murderer, as it turns out. But okay. And then I guess the big story at the time was, here we are, it landed with a thud on newsstands at Walmart and rural supermarkets last month. 97 fawning pages saluting Saudi Arabia, whose ambitious crown prince was soon to arrive in the U.S. on a PR blitz to transform his country's image. This is an AP story that ran in April of 2018. And I guess the mystery was, where did the damn thing come from? As questions swirled about the glossy magazine's origins, the Saudis said they were just as perplexed as everyone else, declaring on Twitter, "If you find out, we'd love to know." But files obtained by the Associated Press show that a digital copy of the magazine, produced by American Media Incorporated, right, was quietly shared with officials at the Saudi embassy in Washington almost 3 weeks before its publication. In other words, here's that magazine you ordered. How do you like it? You like it? We'll run it. How the early copy made it to the Saudis is unclear, yet the revelation adds another mysterious twist to a murky tale playing out against the backdrop of bids by both President Donald Trump and David Pecker, the tabloid publisher who supports him, to build goodwill with the Saudi kingdom's leaders. Anyway, there's lots more to this story, but I don't know, should we read this through? Does this help fill in the blanks, or do we all know these stories? Anyway, that provides the link to Saudi Arabia here. And then, of course, I guess the teaser and all this is, we're now supposed to wonder, what if it was a Saudi-owned Arabia government, quote-unquote governmental source, that came up with the text messages that exposed Bezos here. And it's not out of the question. The Sauds are constantly, it seems, twice now, doing things that they think Donald Trump will really appreciate, and it might even be true, and then getting him into trouble, like murdering Adnan Khashoggi. Not Adnan. Oops. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against it. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you, but remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think it's becoming increasingly clear that I think we might need to wade through these things line by line, and sometimes it's as helpful and interesting to read them and do commentary line by line as it is to skip over things and try to weave together the big picture. And I'm not certain that works out all that well. In fact, listener Asparagus Zucchini, how I like that, says we should get into the complexifiers, as Bezos puts it in his 9th paragraph. And I appreciate your pointing out like which paragraph to jump to. But, maybe the thing to do is to go through this bit by bit here. But boy, things are happening quickly. So I guess where do I start with this? All right, we'll go back to the medium piece. And then we'll discuss maybe more about Saudi Arabia and this. I don't know if the magazine, though, is worth the time. Just, I think, suffice to say that American Media Incorporated is doing work on behalf of the Saudish kingdom, and they're pretending like, gosh, somebody just wanted to write a whole magazine about Saudi Arabia for free, and that's obviously not the case. And but that AMI is in the habit of insisting that they didn't do this thing. for political purposes. They just love Saudi Arabia and felt like 97 pages was a great idea, and they ought to go ahead and do that. I wonder how many of those things they sold. Did they sell any? Were they free? All right. Anyway, so back to Jeff Bezos' piece on Medium. He was describing the outlines of a relationship between AMI and the Saudi government, right? And he says, legitimate media have been challenging the assertion that AMI's statement that says that they don't do reporting instigated, dictated, or influenced in any manner by external forces, political or otherwise, is not true. For instance, see The New Kingdom magazine. Okay. He continues and says, I didn't know much about most of that a few weeks ago when intimate text messages from me were published in the National Enquirer. I engaged investigators to learn how those texts were obtained and to determine the motives for the many unusual actions taken by the Enquirer. As it turns out, there are now several independent investigations looking into this matter. To lead my investigation, I retained Gavin de Becker. I've known Mr. de Becker for 20 years. His expertise in this area is excellent, and he's one of the smartest and most capable leaders I know. I've asked him to prioritize protecting my time, since I have other things I prefer to work on, and to proceed with whatever budget he needed to pursue the facts in this matter. In other words, I don't know whether that was necessary to say, protect my time. That's a very buzzwordy sort of way of saying, whatever you need, whatever budget you want. In other words, spare no expense. I want to find out what's going on here, and then find out and tell me at the end. Don't keep pestering me. Can I spend $10 for a fake mustache to follow this guy around? Okay. Here's a piece of context, he says. My ownership of the Washington Post is a complexifier for me. There's that word. It's unavoidable that certain powerful people, who would that be? I don't know, who experience Washington Post news coverage will wrongly conclude I am their enemy. President Trump is one of those people, in case you were still guessing. Obvious by his many tweets. Also, the Post's essential and unrelenting coverage of the murder of its columnist Jamal, not Adnan, who I think is related to him, Jamal Khashoggi, I'm sorry about that, is undoubtedly unpopular in certain circles. Even though the Post is a complexifier for me, I do not regret my investment. The Post is I was pleased, not really, actually. I was not pleased to read this last night. He was saying, I don't regret my investment, because I was thinking, if you want out, I'll buy the Post from you for $1, and then you'll be free to not, you won't have to worry about the picture thing anymore. But apparently he really enjoys owning the Post. So even though the Post is a complexifier for me, I do not at all regret my investment. The Post is a critical institution with a critical mission. My stewardship of the Post and my support of its mission, which will remain unswerving, is something I will be most proud of when I'm 90 and reviewing my life, if I'm lucky enough to live that long, regardless of any complexities it creates for me. Just stay away from bone saws. Back to the story. He actually says that. It's not me blurting that out. Several days ago, an AMI leader advised us that Mr. Pecker is apoplectic, that's in quotes, about our investigation. For reasons still to be better understood, the Saudi angle seems to hit a particularly sensitive nerve. A few days after hearing about Mr. Pecker's apoplexy, that's funny, we were approached verbally at first with an offer. They said they had more of my text messages and photos that they would publish if we didn't stop our investigation. My lawyers argued that AMI has no right to publish photos since any person holds the copyright to their own photos, and since the photos in themselves don't add anything newsworthy. That's interesting, by the way. It's a fun argument on the side. I mean, after all, if you take naked selfies of yourself, technically speaking, you are the author of those photographs. In copyright law, you take the picture, you own the copyright in it. You don't have to register anything. It's automatic, and I think that also comes through the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. But so yeah, ironically, if you take a nude selfie of yourself and someone threatens to publish it, you can say, aha, it's a copyright violation. Now, they can argue back about the newsworthiness of naked Jeff Bezos pictures, and it's all here in the news. I mean, this is a Medium post. This doesn't count, but it's all over the news elsewhere. They have an argument, but you might as well throw that one out there because, all right, it's going to cost you some money to publish these things, and you might lose. AMI's claim of newsworthiness is that the photos are necessary to show Amazon shareholders, that my business judgment is terrible. I don't know about that. I mean, it might be also terrible, and your picture taking judgment is terrible, but I don't know that, is anybody going to cancel Amazon Prime because, that dick isn't even good looking? I don't know. I am so offended by seeing that. Or, he shouldn't have tattooed "I hate my customers" on his. So, I guess something could happen, but I don't know. Apparently he disagrees. He goes on to say, so my business judgment is terrible, and here's his bragging part. I founded Amazon in my garage 24 years ago and drove all the packages to the post office myself. Today, Amazon employs more than 600,000 people, just finished its most profitable year ever, even while investing heavily in new initiatives, and it's usually somewhere between the number 1 and number 5 most valuable company, it should be, in the world. I will let those results speak for themselves, even though you just said them. But I get it. It's a figure of speech. So 24 years ago. By the way, when was that? I mean, I remember just hearing about. Did Amazon advertise as heavily everywhere else too? I used to hear radio ads all the time. Amazon, the world's biggest bookstore, and it was the running joke in the radio ads was they were looking for places big enough to hold all of their books, even though they didn't really have any or whatever. I don't know. And was that 24 years ago? And he drove the packages to the post office himself. That's so interesting. And where he just had a garage full of books? I don't know. Anyway, okay, he says, back to their threat to publish intimate photos of me. I guess me, my lawyers, and Gavin DeBecker didn't react to the generalized threat with enough fear, so they sent this. Yeah, they actually put something in writing, an email. How dumb is that? From Dylan Howard, who is an AMI guy, the chief content officer of AMI. And his name pops up from time to time. You know who's really always very interested in Dylan Howard, and among other things, is Der Wouter, right? Our friend on Twitter, who's deeply into connecting dots between Donald Trump, AMI people from time to time, but also Paolo Zampoli and the various modeling / human trafficker figures that hung around with Trump in the 80s and still do hang around with him. That's the big deal. Paolo Zampoli is a very, very weird figure. And certainly he's as much a bizarro man of mystery as Carter Page was but in a different sector. So I guess it's possible he's just a big distraction too, but he's a weirdo in his own right. Anyway, email from Dylan Howard, Chief Content Officer of AMI, February 5th, just the other day, to Martin Singer, who is litigation counsel for DeBecker. Subject being Jeff Bezos and Ms. Lauren Sanchez photos. Are we not supposed to read that name? I guess he put it out there for us. That's the name of his girlfriend. All right. Confidential and not for distribution, but Bezos didn't care. This is the cool part of this. I'm not a huge Jeff Bezos fan or anything, but this was all interesting, and I enjoyed this. The idea of just saying, screw it, I'm going to put it all out there. So this is the confidential and not for distribution email to Marty Singer. That's DeBecker, the investigator's lawyer. I am leaving the office for the night. I will be available in my cell. He gives it here, but it gets blocked. He puts in X's for the numbers. However, in the interests of expediting this situation, smug lawyer stuff, right? And with the Washington Post poised to publish unsubstantiated rumors of the National Enquirer's initial report, I wanted to describe to you the photos obtained during our news gathering. So this is news gathering. In addition to the below the belt selfie, otherwise colloquially known as a dick pic, and he types it here, D asterisk CK, and then PICK, which is not really how you spell pic in this context, but okay. Anyway, in addition to this dick pic, the Inquirer obtained a further 9 images. These include Mr. Bezos' face selfie at what appears to be a business meeting. Oh no, he's got terrible business judgment. Ms. Sanchez's response, a photograph of her smoking a cigar in what appears to be a simulated oral sex scene, although sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. A shirtless Mr. Bezos, excellent, holding a phone in his left hand, not right, while wearing his wedding ring. He's wearing, and they make a big deal out of this, the wedding ring. He's wearing either tight black cargo pants or shorts, and what time is it where you are? His semi-erect manhood is penetrating the zipper of said garment. I'm done reading you the descriptions. That's, I think, among them, if that doesn't give you an idea of what it is. But again, there's another one, a full-length body selfie of him wearing tight black boxer, briefs or trunks, phone in his left hand while wearing a wedding ring. This is the wedding ring thing. A selfie of Mr. Bezos fully clothed. That's one of the 9. Full-length, scantily clad body shot with short trunks. Naked selfie in the bathroom, although he's actually wearing a towel. It's not that naked, but it's rather revealing. Again, mention of the wedding ring. You get the idea? So, he then concludes, oh, by the way, there were some pictures at the end of his girlfriend, Lauren Sanchez, wearing this dress, revealing cleavage, and this one with the dress. So, dresses reveal cleavage. That's not such a... But although there is mention of a glimpse of her nether region, he's very creative in the terminology. Anyway, so then he concludes by saying it would give no editor pleasure to send this email. It's a bad choice of words, because I bet it did. I hope common sense can prevail, and quickly. Signed, Dylan. That's Dylan Howard, Chief Content Officer and Vice President of AMI. So, he's playing this smug game of I know how to threaten people. I know how this game is played. Well, Bezos continues, that got my attention, but not in the way they likely hoped. Any personal embarrassment to AMI could cause me takes a back seat because there's a much more important matter involved here. If in my position I can't stand up to this kind of extortion, how many people can? On that point, numerous people have contacted our investigation team about their similar experiences with AMI and how they needed to capitulate because, for example, their livelihoods were at stake. In the AMI letters I'm making public, you'll see the precise details of their extortionate proposal. They will publish the personal photos unless Gavin DeBecker and I make the specific false public statement to the press that we, this is the one we read before, have no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AMI's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces. If we do not agree to affirmatively publicize that specific lie, they said they'll publish the photos, and quickly. And there's an associated threat. They'll keep the photos on hand and publish them in the future if we ever deviate from that lie. Be assured, and this is a good point, no real journalists ever propose anything like what is happening here. I will not report embarrassing information about you if you do X for me, and if you do not do X quickly, I will report the embarrassing information. Nothing I write here could tell the National Enquirer story so eloquently as their own words below. These communications cement AMI's long-earned reputation for weaponizing journalistic privileges, hiding behind important protections, and ignoring the tenets and purpose of true journalism. Of course, I don't want personal photos published, but I also won't participate in their well-known practice of blackmail, political favors, political attacks, and corruption. I prefer to stand up, roll this log over, and see what crawls out. Sincerely, Jeff Bezos. Interesting. Okay. That's, I don't know whether that's stylistically how he's, sincerely Jeff Bezos. He didn't write that. as a letter. I think maybe that's just a little license. So I guess what gets sent next is from John Fine, Deputy General Counsel at AMI, to Martin Singer, DeBecker's attorney. Marty, here are our proposed terms. A full and complete mutual release of all claims that American media, on the one hand, and Jeff Bezos and Gavin DeBecker, the Bezos parties, on the other, may have against each other. A public mutually agreed upon acknowledgement from the Bezos parties released through a mutually agreeable news outlet, affirming that they have no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AM's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces, and an agreement that they will cease referring to such a possibility. AM agrees not to publish, distribute, share, or describe unpublished texts and photos, the unpublished materials. AM affirms that it undertook no electronic eavesdropping in connection with its reporting and has no knowledge of such conduct. Number 5 here, the agreement is completely confidential. Number 6, in the case of a breach of the agreement by one or more of the Bezos parties, AM is released from its obligations under the agreement and may publish the unpublished materials. And 7, any other disputes arising out of this agreement shall first be submitted to JAMS, that's the American, I forget what it stands for, but it's the mediation group in California. Thank you, John, Deputy Media, or General Counsel, Media, American Media, LLC. So there you go. I guess here comes what is this to? Singer. Is this, that's still Marty Singer, Bezos's investigator's lawyer. There's another one in here, I guess. Dear Mr. Singer, I write in response to your February 4th, 2019 letter to Dylan Howard and to address serious concerns we have regarding the continuing defamatory activities of your client and his representatives regarding American media's motivations in its recent reporting about your client. As a primary matter, please be advised that our news gathering and reporting on matters involving your client, including any use of your client's, quote, private photographs, unquote, has been and will continue to be consistent with applicable laws. As you know, the fair use of a copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction and copy, is for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, is not an infringement of copyright. With millions of Americans having a vested interest in the success of Amazon, of which your client remains founder, chairman, CEO, and president, an exploration of Mr. Bezos' judgment as reflected by his texts and photos is indeed newsworthy and in the public interest. It's an argument. Beyond the copyright issues you raise, we also find it necessary to address various unsubstantiated defamatory statements and scurrilous rumors attributed to your client's representatives in the press, suggesting that strong leads, this is a quote, strong leads point to political motives in the publication of the National Enquirer story. Indeed, you yourself declared the politically motivated underpinnings of our reporting to be self-evident in your correspondence on Mr. DeBecker's behalf to Mr. Howard, dated January 31st, 2019. You get the idea. There's a little bit more here. Once again, as I advised you in my February 1 response to your January 31st correspondence, American media emphatically rejects any assertion that its reporting was instigated, dictated, or influenced in any manner by external forces, political or otherwise. Simply put, this was and is a news story. Then a demand that they cease and desist such defamatory conduct, etc., 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 just like Willy Wonka says it. And it's all signed by who? I don't know. It's funny. I guess it doesn't say. The name must just be up at the top here. Why doesn't it say? I don't know. It says at the end, sincerely, and then that's it. And then there's this footnote. So, okay, that's weird. It cuts off the name of the lawyer that's writing on behalf of AMI. And this one, maybe it's John Fine again with his formal voice on. So that's what's going on from Bezos' perspective. That's what blows up the news last night. Now, on top of that, this morning, you'll never believe it, the Washington Post. That's right, the Washington Post. We have the news that, oh shoot, I forgot to read this other part here. Let me open up the Washington Post story that I'm talking about. First, I guess one diversion from the brief reporting in The Hill, that this was after we heard from Julie K. Brown that there was some government entity involved here. I picked up this report from The Hill. A reporter at Washington Post says that an investigator hired by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos believes that text messages leaked to the National Enquirer between Bezos and his girlfriend may have been sent to the magazine by someone in government. And I think that maybe the Washington Post that their report that they're talking about might be this same one that I opened up here. Oh, and I see I've opened up the AMP version of it. So let me see if I can get the Washington Post version of it instead. But I mentioned, so other reporters, I mentioned in reading the Bezos thing, other people, including other reporters, have journalism folks, I guess we should say, because Bezos isn't a reporter, have faced the same sort of blackmail efforts from National Enquirer. And in fact, here's the Washington Post report on it. If they don't cover what the hints about the government involvement are, we can head back to that. But I don't think that there's any clear indication of who they're talking about, just sort of these dark hints that government might be involved, some government. But here's the story. Ronan Farrow says he also faced blackmail efforts from AMI for reporting on the National Enquirer and Trump, and maybe also his breaking the stories that led to the big Me Too movement, because all these people are involved in the same circles here. All right. Allison Chu has written this piece for the Washington Post. Ronan Farrow said Thursday that he and, quote, at least one other prominent journalist, unquote, who had reported on the National Enquirer and President Trump received blackmail threats from the tabloid's parent company, American Media Incorporated, over their work. Wow. Farrow's allegation came just hours after Amazon chief executive Jeffrey P. Bezos published a remarkable public post on Medium accusing the National Enquirer of attempting to extort and blackmail him by threatening to publish intimate photos unless he stopped investigating the publication. Bezos owns the Washington Post. They feel they have to disclose here. In a tweet Thursday night, Farrow wrote that he and the unnamed journalist fielded similar stop digging or we'll ruin you blackmail efforts from AMI. Last April, Farrow published a story in The New Yorker about the Enquirer's catch and kill practice, in which stories are buried by paying off sources that benefited Trump during the 2016 presidential campaign. We know which ones those are about. Farrow added, I did not engage as I don't cut deals with subjects of ongoing reporting. AMI did not immediately return a message from the Post about Farrow's claim. Here is the tweet from Ronan Farrow is embedded in there, but he basically says what we just said. So the allegations from Bezos and Farrow have since prompted other journalists and media outlets to come forward with claims that they too had been targeted by AMI for reporting on the Enquirer. Imagine threatening the First Amendment rights of other journalists for reporting about you. How odd. When you're not even really a decent First Amendment journalist yourself. It's very interesting. We should keep in mind, I want to underline the part of the Bezos post that emphasizes that the National Enquirer, in his view, has been posing as journalists because, well, one, this is not something a real journalist does. They don't make these kinds of threats. And two, that being the case, that they're not real journalists, they are availing themselves of all sorts of protections, legal protections, constitutional protections, and otherwise, that are meant for a real bona fide, as we say here in America, members of the press. Difficult to define, to be sure, but in other words, we assert our First Amendment right to protect our sources. That's the more famous ones, where the sorts of privileges that are available to journalists. But this is not the ones that they're using so much. But these claims, for instance, that we can publish your photos that you took because of the newsworthiness of it. And there's a whole body of First Amendment jurisprudence available to legitimate journalists about publishing this stuff. But Bezos raises a good question. I don't know that he would prevail on it, but it's a good question. Well, was it really the intention of the founders or those who developed the First Amendment jurisprudence in the wake of the founding to extend these protections to people who aren't really journalists and don't abide by journalistic practices? So much so that they instead, they're really a political operation and a blackmail operation, not journalists. Are they entitled to that protection? And not just First Amendment protection, but protection from copyright suit as a result. In other words, are they qualified to pass on whether there's newsworthiness at all? That's a good question, and a fair and open one, I think. Okay, so the allegations from Bezos and Farrow have since prompted other journalists and media outlets to come forward with claims that they too had been targeted by AMI for reporting on the Inquirer. In response to Farrow, former Associated Press editor Ted Bridis, B-R-I-D-I-S, don't know, tweeted, "We were warned explicitly by insiders that AMI had hired private investigators to dig into the backgrounds of AP journalists looking into the tabloid's efforts on behalf of Mr. Trump." Wow, so it's happening everywhere to everyone. Adding, "Never saw evidence of this either way, and it didn't stop our reporting." Bridis, this fellow, claimed in a separate tweet referencing Bezos' Medium post that AMI, the Inquirer, and its lawyers, quote, tried to shut down public interest reporting on tabloids' work on behalf of Trump. So that's at least 3, I guess. We'll see whether there's any more after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We continue with the reading of this Washington Post story on all the other journalists that it turns out that National Enquirer and AMI may have threatened. The Daily Beast also reported that attorneys for AMI responded aggressively to 2 stories published last week that detailed Bezos' investigation into the Inquirer. In its story about Thursday's Medium post, the Daily Beast disclosed that during the process of that reporting, the publication and a member of its staff were threatened by AMI's attorneys. Here embedded is the tweet of Noah Schachtman, who says as much. The Beast didn't describe the threats in more detail, and AMI has yet to respond to their story. On Tuesday, the Washington Post's Mark Fisher, Manuel Roig Franzia, and Sarah Ellison reported the following, and this is quoted from their piece. Documents obtained by the Post show that attorneys for American media sought to persuade the Daily Beast not to publish its initial report, suggesting that Trump's allies may have been involved in the effort to expose the Bezos affair. According to a draft legal complaint, Inquirer attorneys threatened to sue the Daily Beast if it used any information provided by a former Inquirer executive who had been hired by the website. Interesting. On Thursday, Bezos wrote on Medium that he launched an investigation into the Inquirer after it published a story complete with text messages that revealed his relationship with, here's like who she is, former TV anchor of what, I don't know, Lauren Sanchez, in an attempt to figure out how his private information was leaked. In an interview with the Post earlier this week, Bezos' security consultant, Gavin DeBecker, said the Inquirer story came from a, quote, politically motivated, unquote, leak intended to embarrass Bezos. Now, that doesn't get right at the government idea in that line anyway. In his post, Bezos cited emails that he said were from AMI officials, including the company's chief content officer, Dylan Howard, and alleged that the tabloid wanted him and DeBecker to make a false public statement that they have, you know the statement, have no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AMI's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces. Howard also played a notable role in the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault scandal. Dylan Howard from AMI. Okay, so here's one connection. In November of 2017, Farrow, as you know, published an article in the New Yorker referencing emails between Howard and Weinstein, discussing efforts to dig up dirt on Rose McGowan, one of the first actresses to accuse the Hollywood producer of sexual assault. The emails, shared by Bezos, appeared to show Inquirer executives threatening to publish a series of revealing photos of him and Sanchez if the demands were not met. Bezos and Farrow both said they did not bend to the alleged threats, but Bezos noted his investigation revealed that many others had. On Medium, Bezos wrote that, quote, numerous people have contacted our investigation team about their similar experiences with AMI and how they needed to capitulate because, for example, their livelihoods were at stake. The relationship between the Inquirer and Trump has been repeatedly scrutinized by the media, given the president's long friendship with AMI chief executive David Pecker. Beyond Pecker directing the Inquirer to publish favorable stories about Trump in 2016, AMI admitted last year to paying $150,000 in hush money to Karen McDougal, a woman who allegedly had an affair with Trump, to prevent her story from influencing the election. Federal prosecutors in December announced an agreement with AMI that they would not prosecute the company for its role in attempting to skew the race in Trump's favor if it cooperated and admitted to paying off the woman. If Bezos' allegations are accurate, AMI may be in violation of the non-prosecution agreement, which is in part contingent upon the company not committing any crimes, the Post reported Thursday. All you have to do at this point is stop criming, and you're off the hook. And they couldn't or wouldn't or whatever do it. So, wow, they're out of control. Something's got to be done. All right, let me just grab this Hill piece here to see if we can track anything down about where the idea of a government entity comes in. Reporter, Bezos investigator believes government entity may have obtained texts by John Bowden, or Bowden, B-O-W-D-E-N. A reporter at the Washington Post says that an investigator hired by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos believes that text messages leaked to the National Enquirer between Bezos and his girlfriend may have been sent to the magazine by someone in government. In an appearance on MSNBC on Thursday, Post reporter Manuel Roig Franzia said that Bezos' security consultant Gavin DeBecker believes that National Enquirer obtained text messages from Bezos through inappropriate means. We heard that. Bezos said on Thursday in a blog post that the Enquirer was attempting to force him to call off his investigation of the tabloid under the threat of further texts being released. They have begun to believe, the Bezos camp, that this publication by the National Enquirer might have been politically motivated, Roig Franzia said Thursday. So far, so good, but doesn't answer the question yet. Gavin DeBecker told us that he does not believe that Jeff Bezos' phone was hacked. He thinks it's possible that a government entity might have gotten hold of his text messages, he added. All right, so that's interesting. And there we have it. That's our source. So it's Manuel Roig Franzia saying that Gavin DeBecker said that I don't think that the texts got into their hands through hacking, or at least not hacking by American media. And by the way, did we all forget that case over in the UK of Rupert Murdoch's operations actually hacking people's phones? I mean, you probably haven't forgotten about it, but it's worth saying, oh yeah, about that. But okay. Just wanted to bring that up again. But I guess the thinking here is, well, I guess Gavin DeBecker, being an investigator, says that he's got no evidence, I don't know how good he is at this, that Bezos' phone was hacked. So that's not how the texts got into the hands of either AMI or whoever provided them to AMI. Or that's the theory anyway. Of course, it doesn't say anything so far about whether or not Lauren, what's her name? The girlfriend's phone was hacked. That's a possibility. I assume they would have looked into that too, but it doesn't say anything about that here. And I don't know whether they're then saying, so how would it have been hacked? And one possibility is that it was intercepted by some government entity. Is that all it is? Because there's also, well, her phone might have been hacked. Some other thing in the middle somewhere might have been hacked. I don't know where the evidence of government involvement comes. Let's continue. Now I'm intrigued. De Becker's assertion that Bezos' phone was not hacked raises questions as to how staffers at the Inquirer obtained messages that were allegedly sent. Right. Blah, 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 with just what we said. And Lauren Sanchez is her name. Okay. The Inquirer is owned by David Pecker, an ally of Trump's. Pecker has been accused of helping the president kill unfavorable stories about his past affairs during the election. Bezos and Trump have feuded publicly over Amazon and its relationship with the federal government, as well as Bezos' ownership of the Washington Post, which the president says unfairly targets him with negative news coverage. In a Medium post Thursday night, the Amazon CEO vowed not to fall for the extortion tactics from Pecker and American Media Incorporated, which owns the Inquirer, and then restating the thing. Not going to capitulate. But that's it. So pretty weak for the claim of government involvement if there's nothing more out there than that. Intriguing, exciting, titillating even. But nothing solid in that. So that's kind of disappointing. All right. Other stories that beg for coverage. Where to go? I mentioned our Twitter friend, Der Wouter. You'll find him under that handle, but Wouter Vanderhorst. And like I said, he's much more conspiracy forward than I like to be, but I do find a lot of this stuff that he follows pretty intriguing. Let's throw this one out for fun on a Friday. I can't connect it to anything, but if you were, like we discussed earlier in the week, foolish enough, daring enough to actually watch the State of the Union address or digested it the way I did from afar, if you digested it from afar, you might have missed this, as I initially did, until Wouter brought it up, that there was some mention during the State of the Union address of the St. Jude Children's Hospital Network and Foundation. I guess there was some sort of effort announced to fund childhood cancer research, and then of course there was also a AIDS research funding initiative announced, both of which I think were surprisingly weak sounding. There just wasn't a great deal of money for things that are so important and that you would mention them in the State of the Union address. I think that whether it was the AIDS or the AIDS research or the cancer research or both, I'm not sure which, but they were talking about something in the neighborhood of $500 million over 10 years. So like a $50 million a year commitment for 10 years or something like that, which, billionaires can do themselves. But, he's going to use the government to do this. So it was a little underwhelming, to say the least. And so I guess that in the discussion of the cancer issue, St. Jude must have come up. And that probably rings a bell for many of you, not just because of St. Jude's work in pediatric cancer, but you might remember that among the many fake charitable efforts undertaken by the Trump family, the one that once seems to have not been a grift was Eric Trump's charity, which raised money for St. Jude. this was in the initial stages when it was up to him to run the place. And then it seems, remember this story from way back? It seems like what happened was the rest of the family found out that there was no grift in this thing. And they were like, this is an opportunity cost. We need to be able to take this over and suck the money out of it. And Eric, little by little, ended up having to give up control, maybe he did it willingly, of the board of his charity to his father's cronies until they finally just turned it into another Donald Trump foundation. They were basically, it was like, what's the harm in all this? You're raising money and you're using the Trump properties to underwrite the charity, and in a not improper way, I would say. You own these golf courses, and so let's have a charity golf tournament, and we won't charge the charity any money. We'll donate the use of the course for the day, and then people will pay their entry fees, and we'll have a dinner and an auction, and the money that's raised this way, there'll be more of it because we don't have to pay the golf course, we don't have to pay for the catering, etc. We'll donate to St. Jude. And then the Trump family realized, we could be grifting like crazy off of this. We should charge for the use of the golf course. We should charge for the catering. And we should put our people on the board and move money around and move giant chunks of the money from the charity to our foundation and back and forth and try and steal it that way. And they eventually corrupted the hell out of that thing too. And then they had to change the name of it and everything because it was a huge mess. Well, anyway, this interesting conjecture here thrown out from Der Wooter that the mention of St. Jude in the State of the Union, particularly without a major initiative attached to it, sort of stood out as odd. But because St. Jude is what it is, under a normal presidency, you'd say, all right, so the effort from the government isn't very strong, but okay. They're invoking a trusted name in pediatric cancer charities and research. It is what it is. But it never is what it is with the Trumps, right? The suggestion now is Eric Trump's grifting foundation, at some point, pledged to raise $20 million for St. Jude. It's a nice thing to do. But, and they were probably after him. Like, oh my God, Eric, don't pledge anything like that. It's a pain in the ass. You don't want to have to follow up on it. His dad does it all the time. And then it's like, God, now I got to come up with the money, probably from somebody else, to cover this pledge. So when irregular payments to Trump businesses from Eric Trump's grifting foundation were found and exposed, they stopped making payments on this $20 million pledge to St. Jude. But it was too late. There'd been the ribbon cutting. There was the Eric Trump Foundation wing of the St. Jude Hospital facility and pictures of him and murals on the wall and ribbon cuttings and the whole bit. And he's pledged $20 million and the money stops coming. And St. Jude is like, where's our dollars? So they still owe several million of dollars on that pledge, apparently. So here's how the Trump family takes care of it. Dad, I'm several million dollars behind on that $20 million pledge. Maybe we could make it up to St. Jude in some other way. I don't know whether they're threatening to take his name off the wing or anything like that, or he's just embarrassed, or they're going to sue. I have no idea what the situation is, if there even is a situation. But the conjecture here is that he talks to Dad, and Dad says, tell you what we should do. I'm not going to give him the cash, that's for sure. Forget that. I'll plug him in the State of the Union, which is his MO. He does do that sort of thing all the time. We read those stupid stories about how Mr. Billionaire there wanted to give Melania a fancy, huge diamond wedding ring or gift of some kind, and that the kids, Don Jr., similarly in getting engaged, wanted a big-ass fancy diamond ring, which for a billionaire should be no problem. Just snap your fingers and get a 20-carat diamond ring. Just go to the store and get one. But instead of doing that, they set up that crazy ass, this is a filthy grift for a bunch of supposed billionaires, I thought, where they would get engaged. This was Don Jr.'s thing, right? At, what was it? Bailey, Banks, and Biddle? Am I slandering them if I say it was them? It was some, mall jewelry store at the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey that agreed that if you plug our stupid jewelry store here and on The Apprentice, then we'll give you for free one of these stupid rings. But you got to come and propose to your fiance at the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey and give her the ring there. I mean, that's just filthy. And he agreed. He did it. And so Trump has done that himself. His kids do that. And so I can easily imagine, oh my God, I owe $10 million on my pledge to St. Jude. Dad, plug them in the State of the Union. And, of course, they'll be like, this is an unbelievable opportunity. You're not going to get you can't buy. You literally cannot buy, although I would sell it to you if you were interested. So you can buy publicity like this in the State of the Union by the President of the United States. Can you imagine? You owe us money. He probably said that. I'll plug you in the State of the Union. You give me $10 million. Amazing. Anyway, all conjecture as far as I can tell, but it's entirely possible. And I just wanted to throw that into the rumor mill for the weekend. There's my contribution to slander. So that's the story. They owe several $1 million. So St. Jude was featured yesterday at the State of the Union. Wow. So that would be pretty amazing if that was the case. Let's see. What do we have? He's got a tweet embedded here. The fundraising arm of St. Jude's gave Trump a shout out on Twitter, and Grace Eline, E-L-I-N-E, that's the 10-year-old who was Melania's guest, was on Fox News today. Solid gold. That, according to the Tennessee Commercial Appeal, I guess, was sending that story around. Let me see. Does that, it doesn't make that accusation, does it? I guess they're just talking about St. Jude's ALSAC, A-L-S-A-C, I'm not sure what it stands for, gives Trump a shout out as cancer survivor featured in the State of the Union. They had the girl there as Melania's guest. And how grubby would it be to besmirch that whole thing in connection with covering up a grift? That's pretty amazing. I don't think it says anything about that in there, but it describes, I guess, the connection between the messaging in the State of the Union address and St. Jude anyway. So that's pretty wild. So there you have it. That's something else for you to chew on over the weekend. Pretty amazing, if you ask me. Don't know. Let's see. Let me check in with our comments here as well. Mad Hatter thanking us for trying to read the descriptions of the dick pics there. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's see. Michael Musson saying, how dare these, quote, bloggers besmirch the actions of the journalists at National Enquirer? True. And what else? There is some argument against reforming the law such that for paying for information and attempting blackmail, remove First Amendment protections from the tainted material. Is there some argument against reforming the law such that paying for information and attempting blackmail remove First Amendment protections for the tainted material? Maybe. And it might come up in the context of when you can't tell exactly, when there are conflicting descriptions of what you're doing, and it's not entirely clear whether you're going to be able to drop it in the journalism box or the extortion box, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure there's some downside to the idea, but you won't know it until you hit it. So, hey, let's go for it. All right, let's see. There's other stories that I wanted to get to as well, and man, I'm running out of time already. I can see it. Let me throw this one out there for you. A general theme, just to bring back an oldie but a goodie, gun fail on the show. I guess I'll pat myself on the back for injecting another storyline into the national narrative. This latest one, picked up by the Trace and co-published as between the Trace and who was it? When I open up the piece, it tells you. It's a very fancy presentation of this thing, and I got to do a lot of scrolling. Let's see. The New Yorker. They co-published this thing with. Anyway, the story is what I used to sum up on Twitter as, it's almost as if guns attract crime. In other words, a long, showy piece on the lack of security, the lack of requirements for any sort of security at gun stores. They open up with this line here. Most gun stores face no legal requirements to secure the weapons they sell. This sets them apart from other businesses that deal in dangerous products such as pharmacies and explosives makers. It does. And of course, it sets them up for very easy and particular kinds of smash and grab robberies. Guns get stolen from gun stores all the time. This is sort of an expose of how easy it is and how frequent it is. And I'm glad it's coming up. That's the job of the people at the Trace, I guess. Although it is kind of annoying that the people at the Trace pretend that we don't exist, and they've never had any kind of interest in or acknowledgement of the gun fail stuff at all in any way, shape, or form, except to take it, run with it, and it's good that they run with it, and I don't see why they can't run with it and push it into mainstream publications and say this was a good idea and we appreciate your help, but that's apparently not forthcoming. Although, who knows, maybe they're examining exactly the same things in parallel with me and entirely ignorant of the fact that that's happening. Anyway, it's not like you get a big check for it or anything like that. But anyway, good on them for getting this story published. I will continue to believe that I had something to do with it and be pleased with that. But that's not all there is in gun news. The latest facts from the TSA are out. NBC News reporting, let me grab their piece here to get their headline. Come on, computer, you can do it. TSA screeners found record number of firearms in carry-on bags in 2018. Subheader lets you know how many. An average of nearly 12 weapons were found every day for a total of 4,239 during all of 2018. Wow. No surprise to me, of course. Only thing I found missing from the headline, although maybe they cover it in the body. Yeah, sort of. They kind of hint at the trend, but not as strongly as they should. The point could be made best this way. They've found a record-breaking number of firearms in carry-on bags in 2018, 4,239, as we said. That, it should be pointed out, broke the record set in 2017 by the TSA when they found a record number as well. And, it's a bit of a trend, to say the least, because the record in 2017 broke the previous record, which had been set in 2016, you see, which also broke the record of set in 2015, which also broke the record set in 2014, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8, just in case you were wondering. And in other words, this has been a huge, huge trend. And if you've been watching at all, it will come as no surprise to you exactly how this trend has been running. So let's see. On our way into our last break, I'll give you some numbers because this will illustrate exactly what we're talking about. Remember, 4,239 found in 2018, right? 2017, 3,957. 2016, 3,391. 2015, 2,653. on and on and on. In other words, they've been breaking the records for the last 10, actually 11 years in a row in an unbroken trend. It is only in 2007 when they don't, where 2006 numbers topped the 2007 numbers by about under 20. But in 2006, they found 821 guns, 803 in 2007, 660 in 2005. Think about this. This is a 450% increase. Amazing. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just to pick up on the theme we left off with just before the break, enormous growth in the number of guns found by TSA agents each year at airports. Keep in mind that we're talking about people with guns going to the airports with those guns. And way, way up from 2005. Did we even have a TSA? Was it TSA in 2005 or was it something else? Because the article from NBC News that we referenced at the opening of this says at the bottom here, the number of weapons found has gone up every year since TSA began reporting the data, from 926 in 2008 to 4,239 last year. And I guess that and the rate of guns seized per passenger screened has also risen steadily. I don't know whether that's a way of writing around the awkward thing about it. Basically, it's gone up every year since 2005, except for the year 2007 when it went down by like 16 guns or something like that. But this makes it sound like, as I say, it's gone up every year since TSA began reporting data from 926 in 2008, when data has been, I've got data in front of me that appears to be reported from them since 2005. So what's the deal? And the 600 number is a lot more shocking. 660 guns in 2005. But again, like I said, 660 to 4,293 is above a 450% increase if I've done my percentage correctly, my percentage math. So why? Gee whiz, what could possibly be happening here? And this one's for you, Armando. It wasn't in 2005, but every year that there's been the increase over the past year, so here we would have to, let's lop off 2005 and 6 and 7, 5, 6, and 7, where the numbers went 660, 803, 660, 821, 803. Then, from 2008 on, there's an unbroken chain of broken records, essentially, is what I'm saying here. And it goes 660, 821, 803. Then from 803, it goes to 926, 976, 1,123, 1,320, 1,556, 1,813, 2,212, 2,653, 3,391, 3,957, and then finally 4,293. That is huge growth. What happens at the beginning of that run of unbroken growth? And the answer is since we're measuring from 2008. Although you might wonder what accounts for the increase between 2008 and 2005. I'm not entirely sure, but we could guess at that. But in 2008, it just so happens, is the date of DC versus Heller decision being handed down by the Supreme Court. The decision that establishes for the first time, and I don't even want to say it establishes, that claims for the first time, and we have to take it as established, but it's only temporarily established, that there is a personal right to bear arms in public, unconnected to military service, militia service, police work, or anything. That is the first such holding of the Supreme Court. And this, I think, leads to an explosion of concealed carry and open carry laws across the country. It doesn't necessarily begin with this, but I think it is highly accelerated by this. And here we hearken back to the old story, the old school way of handling concealed and or open carry in most states. Some states have always had it, and some states have always been very liberal with it. But there was a very big change, driven, of course, by NRA lobbying, in how people get permitted for personal carry in this country in the last 10 years. And in the old days, gun permits like that were hard to come by. You could get them. There was a Second Amendment out there, and people did exercise Second Amendment rights and fought hard, for whatever reason, for the right to carry these weapons. But in many jurisdictions, the law, in many states, the law was that in order to get such a permit, you had to go through the ringer. You had to make an application to the local sheriff, essentially, and that and many states gave the local sheriffs the discretion to issue those permits based on, character. Are you an upstanding character in the community? If you're a convict, if you're a shady character, if you're a known troublemaker, whatever, it would give a lot of discretion, maybe too much discretion to the sheriffs, so that if you wanted a permit, you could ask for it, but you could be denied. Somewhere along the line, and maybe prompted in part by Heller and their own, their desires in all of this, obviously, was to change this stuff. But the NRA taught people through organizations like ALEC, where they would just give you the legislation, to, this could all be changed in a very simple fashion. With just one or two changes in the wording of your current law, you could change these things. And this is where the shall issue movement came from. Instead of the state law saying that on application to the local sheriff, the sheriff may issue this permit based on their discretion, let's remove the discretion and simply have it say in state law that upon application to the local sheriff, the local constabulary, the sheriff shall issue your permit. And they have no choice. All you got to do is fill out the paperwork. And if you're living in one of those states where you're supposed to take a course in order to be certified, bring the paperwork that says you took the course, even though we learned years ago for instance, at least in Missouri, in the St. Louis, Missouri area, there were plenty of people who were, well, at least one, I should say. I imagine there were more than one, but there's one documented case anyway. Let's be honest about that. Were people who were willing to sign the paperwork, whether you took the course or not, essentially. Just pay me the money, I'll sign the paperwork. No one's any the wiser. Besides, as you know, you only have to flash the gun. You don't actually have to use it in order to defend yourself, blah, 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 blah. It'll probably never come up. Don't worry about it. Well, they got caught. Anyway, point is that lots of state legislatures, in their frenzy for expanding gun rights, they jumped on the shall issue bandwagon, thanks largely to ALEC and, of course, NRA lobbying money. We'll kill you if you don't vote for this, essentially, at the ballot box, of course. Wink, wink, we're gun rights people. Change your law. Become a shall issue state. And then there was this explosion. Now, anybody who could fill out the paperwork could get themselves a permit, thanks both to the Heller decision and the shall issue movement. Anybody who wanted to could get themselves a concealed carry permit, go to the gun shop, pay a couple $100, get a gun, forget about it apparently, and bring it to the airport. So what else explains a 450% increase in the number of guns being seized? Now, not being seized, being found. Very often they're returned to the owners. Some jurisdictions seize them. Some jurisdictions just say, tisk, tisk, this is bad. And so, first, I'm sure gun rights people would be like, how do you know that, that's the story, that there's more irresponsible gun owners than ever is the shakeout of this story. That's what I think is happening. That's what you think is happening. They think something else is happening. So it'd be interesting to press these anti-government types that seem to overlap with the gun rights crowd. Oh, I see. You think the TSA has gotten 450% more efficient in the last 10 years. Is that it? Well, they may have better x-ray equipment. And they might. That's true. But as somebody else was pointing out, unless you think the TSA is perfect, there's a large increase in the number of guns getting onto those flights undetected as well, which is a pretty scary thought all by itself. But compounded with this, who knows? I don't know. What a sick society we're living in. And also, if anything, with the passage of time, people should become more aware of the necessity to not bring guns onto an airplane by accident or otherwise. I also think, by the way, there's a pretty huge increase in the number of idiots who actually carry their guns onto, or attempt to carry their guns onto planes and think they're right to do so. Not forgot it in my bag. That may be the excuse they give, but who actually think, no, this is the thing to do. And I might even be right. I might even be able to legally prove that I get to do this because constitution. But then it turns out, oh, gee whiz, law enforcement in my face saying no. Anyway, just wanted to kind of point that one out there and to make that connection. And I think it's worth talking about. What is it in this country that in the last 10 years, there's an explosion of people, A, carrying guns, and B, doing so without, if they're to be believed, without any idea that they're even doing it. No awareness of where their very often loaded weapon is. And, how many years has it been since it was not a good idea to walk into an airport with a gun? Come on, duh. So what you're telling me is a 450% increase of people too stupid to be allowed to carry the guns, showing that they are in fact, 450% increase in gun fail among responsible gun owners. So good job, well performed, responsible gun owners. Thanks for living up to your reputation. I just wanted to put that out there. No, the other news organizations are not likely to make a big deal out of that. So I will. Okay. Now, one other thing that also might be intriguing to Armando, and maybe I think where he's spending his time today. This should have, by all rights, been the kickoff story of the day for today, but it isn't because too many other stupid things happened. Matt Whitaker, the alleged acting attorney general, was subpoenaed by the which committee? Was it the Judiciary Committee? Yes. Jerry Nadler, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has, in the last week or so, and we didn't cover the story, he subpoenaed Whitaker to appear before his committee to testify on, any number of things. I'm trying to look to see, did I ever put away the original story on it? And I don't think I actually did, or at least we never got to it anyway. I'm going to be further down the list here. But at any rate, he subpoenaed Whitaker to come and testify before the committee on, various angles of the several investigations into what the hell happened in the last election, and how are you or the next attorney general going to handle the Mueller investigation, and are you going to be hands off about it, or are you going to try to interfere, and what's going to happen with the report, et cetera, et cetera. and we want you to come and answer some questions. And they subpoenaed him. And he responded the other day by saying, listen, I will come and testify, but I will not come and testify unless you withdraw the subpoena, which had people up in arms about the idea that, what is this? He's dictating these terms. I thought we were going to be able to have subpoena power, and what is this nonsense? And basically, Nadler was saying, I'm subpoenaing you to appear, and I'm subpoenaing certain information. What I want is the subpoena as backup to ensure that you won't try to walk out here without answering our questions, or dodge it, or try and claim some sort of executive privilege, or give us half-assed answers. You're under subpoena to give this testimony. And, we've talked about what that means and what is the strengths and weaknesses of those subpoenas and who can they force to do what with them. But essentially, Whitaker told them, I will appear, but I will not appear if under subpoena. And people, like I said, were outraged about it and assumed, and they were probably right in their assumptions, that this meant I will only appear if I am not compelled to actually answer your questions and or tell you the truth. Now, the compulsion to tell the truth remains with or without the subpoena. But they're partially right. However, I wanted to point out, my recollection in all of the study that I did of subpoena power and all the reading I did about contempt powers in particular, which is what underlies a subpoena's power. Why does a subpoena have power? Because they can hold you in contempt if you don't respond adequately to it, both in court and, as we learned, in Congress. You can be held in contempt of Congress, but then there's this technical problem that normally these days, when Congress holds you in contempt with a resolution, they refer the resolution for prosecution to the Justice Department, who prosecutes you statutorily for contempt of Congress. But very few people can imagine, let's say, Matt Whitaker, the acting attorney general, allegedly, prosecuting himself for contempt of Congress. So what do you have to turn to? Maybe inherent contempt. If you heard those episodes, great. If you didn't, research it. I'll be glad to discuss it some other day. But for right now, suffice to say, it's a difficult thing to enforce a subpoena from Congress against even an alleged acting attorney general. And so Whitaker says, I'm not coming under subpoena. I'll come and talk to you, but you got to withdraw the subpoena. And as outrageous as that seemed, I also think that in all the reading that I did, I think that this is actually more or less standard practice, at least for attorneys general or acting attorneys general and the Department of Justice. But I think it may even be executive branch wide. It's certainly the case for presidents and vice presidents. You may recall the times at which Cheney or George W. Bush were asked to testify under oath and were subpoenaed by various investigators, and they too refused to. They were willing to sit down and talk, but they refused to do so under order from the legislative branch to do it. And the excuse given was that there were various separation of powers / checks and balances objections to this, that the executive branch, at least in the person of the president, couldn't be compelled to do anything at all with respect to providing testimony, particularly if he was going to claim some sort of executive privilege, by the legislative branch. But my recollection is that there are plenty of examples previous wherein cabinet secretaries, or in this case, acting cabinet secretaries, were likewise subpoenaed, then refused to appear unless the subpoena was withdrawn. And in almost all cases, if not all cases, the Congress eventually did comply. And the thing that was going on here, I think, or one of the things that you should keep in mind in figuring out what was happening, was it wasn't necessarily solely the case that Matt Whitaker was refusing to testify, or that was afraid of testifying, though those two things might also be true, but rather that he was also, maybe not rather, but he was also, I'm distracted by something that just flew by. He was also invoking past DOJ practice that attorneys general don't want to do anything that would tend to establish a precedent that could be interpreted as meaning that the legislative branch could compel key officers of the executive branch to testify. That this was a separation of powers issue generally. And then people objected to my pointing that out. And there's a lot of nuance to it. And it's not always the case that such an appearance would establish such a precedent. But it's it's standard practice, I think, for DOJ to do anything that they can to make sure that executive branch officials are not agreeing to being compelled to give testimony by the legislative branch. They will agree to give that testimony for the sake of interbranch comity and to acknowledge the inherent right of the legislative branch to conduct oversight, but they don't want to do anything, and they fight every single time, no matter who it is. Eric Holder fought the same way. You can't be subpoenaing me to do this stuff. You can't be subpoenaing the executive branch from the legislative branch to do these things. Now, others objected yesterday. Well, doesn't that mean then that inherently there's no power of the legislature to conduct oversight except under threat of impeachment or inherent contempt? And the answer is, at bottom, yes, that is exactly what it means. And that if you press hard enough and go to court over it and say, well, we have to be able to subpoena them, because otherwise how do we exercise our power of oversight? And the answer from the court likely is, we don't want to address this. This is a political question. You two branches are going to have to settle this yourselves. I, as the judicial branch, certainly originalists would say, can't compel the executive branch to answer to the legislative. It's just not something I can do. If you think I can, I mean, I guess you could come up with a theory that says, yes, I can. But here's the deal. You have the power to do something with a recalcitrant witness. You can impeach him. You can hold him in inherent contempt. Well, those are such blunt instruments. That's terrible. And the optics of them are horrific. Well, those are the tools you have. The remedies exist. Stop bothering me. I think that's what most of the federal courts would prefer to say if push came to shove. So it's always been the practice, as far as I know, of the executive branch to say, let's not allow push to come to shove. We will come and speak, but we will only do so voluntarily. Withdraw the subpoena or I can't go. I can't. Too much at stake. Too much precedential value in my knuckling under to your subpoena. If you want to imprison me, if you want to impeach me, I can't stop you. Only you can stop you. I hope it won't come to that. It's not that I won't talk to you. It's that if I come to you under subpoena, the next gang will subpoena me directly, and then we're going to, and at one point it's going to be over something that I feel like I can't or shouldn't share with you, either for nefarious reasons or national security reasons, and a secretary, a president, a vice president is going to end up getting impeached over intransigence, possibly on the part of a partisan Congress and not necessarily a partisan president or whatever the target is. And we just shouldn't build to that unless it's absolutely necessary. Considering that I'm willing to come and talk to you, it would be a better idea if you just let me do that. And sure enough, today, it turns out Nadler said, yesterday it turned out, but he's come to testify today. Yes, I will withdraw the subpoena. You can come and speak to us on a voluntary basis because we've gotten right back to the same contentious point we've been at every time there's a problem with as between congressional investigators and members of the executive branch. It's a very familiar dance, and if you've ever seen it done before, you would have known that it was going to end like this. Don't necessarily be disappointed in Jerry Nadler, except to say that, Nadler, you saw this happen in the George W. Bush administration. How could you have forgotten how this dance goes? Oh, yeah. Well, I needed to put on an act because people wanted to see subpoenas flying, so I flew some subpoenas. So we withdrew it in the end. Anyway, apparently Whitaker has showed up and tried to filibuster his way out of the hearings, as I have filibustered my way out of this show, refusing to or saying that he was not inclined to spend time answering even Chairman Nadler's questions because the chairman's time was up. But I'm sure they can make arrangements to find some time elsewhere for those questions to be answered. Anyway, time to close things out for the day. Didn't get to all the other fun stuff that we need to do, but surely there's more headed your way with Justice Putnam following show. I guess the thing that flashed across my screen, I was warned by Lisa Iannucci's good eye once again, sending me David Farenthold's tweet that says, stand by for some new reporting about Donald Trump's businesses. And here it is, the tweet that says, his Bedminster, New Jersey golf course employed so many undocumented immigrants. How many undocumented immigrants were there? So many undocumented immigrants that there's an entire town in Costa Rica built on Trump paychecks. And we found it. Quote, my whole town practically lived there, one said of the Trump course. Wow. So that'll be a biggie. I'll share it with you in the list. We will talk about it on Monday. Not a huge surprise, but in the sense that, once we knew they had 1, 2, 10, 5 of them, there was likely that they were going to have hundreds of them. And the upshot of it is Trump is a total hypocrite and there can't possibly be a national emergency. But again, you knew that already coming in. So, okay, let's see. Is there anything else on an emergency basis that I need to toss out on the way out the door here? No, but we can preview some good stuff for next week. I got some great suggestions for some long reads. Anything else that really, absolutely, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Oh, yeah, well, there was Paul Erickson getting indicted for fraud. He's the NRA person and a Republican operative and boyfriend of Russian agent Maria Butina. Let's see. The Justice Department opening a probe into Jeffrey Epstein's plea deal. That may have some relevance across some of the stories we've discussed today, perhaps including the National Enquirer stories, after all, as well. And, let's see. What else? Oh, some more evidence of just how much money was at stake for the Moscow Tower deal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on. And, there's no end to the garbage floating to the top. We'll never catch up all the way, though, with all the stories confronting us. But we'll give it another shot next week. And, of course, coming up next, Justice Putnam with his... Oh, why is this taking too long? Okay, Justice Putnam telling me, though, he didn't actually get to make a show for today. He's actually on travel, as I understand it, doing some personal travel. And so instead, he's got coming up for you a documentary about Charles Bukowski and Denise Levertov in place instead. So, okay, we'll be checking back in with him. He's away on family biz for the next couple of days. So thanks, by the way, for setting things up mechanically for us so that we can successfully broadcast the show even in your absence. And thank you for thinking of folks, giving us some good Friday content. It's too bad that you won't be on hand to talk about things live today because there's an awful lot to get to, and even the things that we just hinted at the close of things today are pretty intriguing. And man, there's a million other things to get to, but what a crazy day. It should be a crazy weekend too. And man, I don't know how things are going to blow up. I was just going to sit as is and fester over the Jeff Bezos story for the weekend, or will Trump feel like he has to slap back in some way and just step in it deeper and deeper? That's been his MO to this point. Or maybe he spends the weekend grousing about Farenthold's reporting on his employment of undocumented labor. No surprise again, it's the cheapest labor available. And Donald Trump is the cheapest employer I can think of as well. So he might have stiffed those people on top of it all.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, do take care over the weekend, and stay tuned. We'll see whether there's a country to come back to on all of this. Certainly seems like it should be amazing weekend to watch. I don't know where the president is going to spend it, but if he's on his way to Mar-a-Lago, where he employs yet more illegal immigrants, we'll see.